for me, it was, I've trained for it. I'm here. I have to do it. I need to try. And if I fail, then I'll try again. So I wasn't afraid of failure. And I think that was what helped me more than anything else. I wasn't afraid of it.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, who is allergic to cats, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 48 of the Running for Real podcast. We are just 2 away from 50. As I mentioned last week, we have a very special guest coming on for episode 50, someone I've been trying to get for many, many years, and I'm excited for that one. So just a few more and we will be there. Have any of you guessed who it is yet? I am curious to know. If you want to reach out to me via social media, or you could post it in the Running for Real Superstars community if there isn't already a conversation going on about that. I would love to hear from you. If you haven't joined the community yet, you can find it at tinamuir.com/community. So last week we had Kiralee Deer on the show, and she's an ultra marathoner just like you and I. Not an ultra marathoner just like you and I, but she's a person just like you and I. Someone who is realistic, relatable, not an Olympian who is incredibly fast, who we can never dream to be like. But Kiralee is just, a normal person, but she's done these incredible things to raise money for charity. Her story was really inspiring, and hopefully it showed you that you too can do things that challenge you, and you can really see what you're made of. Now, today I have another inspirational guest, but she's kind of inspirational for a different reason. Now, this guest is kind of different to you and I, has achieved things that most of us could never even dream of, but she also has a lot going on behind the story, and that is what she is here to share about today. To be real with us, and she is real with us in a way very few people can be. Kim Jones has run a 2:26 marathon, finished second at Boston, but she is a true example of someone who's just real and open about her struggles. You're going to love this one, and you're going to absolutely love Kim. What a role model this woman is. I can't wait for you to hear what you think about her. So after a quick word from V and Body Health, we will be right to the interview. New year, new you. Well, kind of. By now, most of us know that big New Year's resolutions really don't stick most of the time. But small ones that we can actually stick to, they will make a heck of a difference. Just like adding Body Health Perfect Amino to your routine made a big difference for me, and it could to you too. When you're out there running and you're really struggling and you do listen to music just to kind of help get you through, the quality of the headphones really makes such a huge difference. And V, in addition to being a great running buddy and training partner, has amazing sound. Make sure you check it out at getv.com/runningforreal. Kim, thank you so much for being here on the Running for Real podcast today. I am really excited to learn from you and just show our listeners how they can just overcome things, be stronger, and have some perspective on running. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is great. And I want to begin on a bit of a strange note, but it's something that I kept reading in other places about you, which is that you became a marathoner or maybe even a runner after seeing Joan Benoit win in the first Olympic marathon for women. And I just firstly wondered, what was it about that performance in particular that gave you such a big nudge to want to do it? Like, there's obviously loads of female running role models. What was it about Joan's performance that just really kind of struck you?
A couple things were going on at that time for me. I had just started my running career. I hadn't run a marathon yet. I had won my hometown race, a 12K, and won a trip to the Honolulu Marathon. Okay. And so I was thinking, there's no way I can run a marathon. Maybe I'll just go and enjoy it as a vacation. And then a week later, I watched Joni, perform or run really well in the trials, the Olympic trials in Olympia, Washington. And I was so inspired to see her run with, just after having knee surgery and taking off and, and running strong through, I'm sure she was uncomfortable and I'm sure she had some self-doubt, going into a marathon. And just seeing her perform so well and be so brave and strong gave me the courage to give a marathon a try. And I actually did run the Honolulu Marathon that winter.
What a great one to start with as well. You can't ask much better than that. And so, when it came to that, you said that she was such a pivotal player. Have you ever mentioned that to her? Or I'm sure she's seen it online somewhere, but have you two ever actually discussed that she was the one that gave you the belief that you could do it?
Yes, actually, Joni and I became really good friends, and
that's great.
We used to have dinner together before our races, and talk about personal things as well as running. And what really topped off my my desire to run the Honolulu Marathon was after she won the Olympic trials, she came back and won the Olympic gold.
Yeah,
and the way she did it was just so brave and so inspiring that there was no way I was not going to run a marathon after doing that.
Yeah, and how important do you think it is for runners, and particularly females, maybe younger females, to have role models in running? Do you think that does play a big part in what people should be able to do?
I think so. I think it's really helpful to look up to somebody, and hopefully, and I think with our news and media and so forth, I think the elite runners are more attainable. You can reach them and, go on Facebook or Twitter and contact, the elite runners. And most of them are very, very good about getting back to, up and coming runners and, seasoned runners as well. And it's nice to see that interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking of being able to look up and kind of see people, especially those up and coming runners, you may have finished second at Boston, which is incredible, finished second at Berlin running 2:26. But one of the things I wanted to kind of highlight in this episode is that you progressed from a 2:48 in your first marathon to 2:35, 2:32, and then that 2:26. Now, obviously for a lot of my listeners, a 2:26 or even a 2:48 is absolutely unattainable. And they're okay with that. It's good to see that you didn't just kind of blast on the scene running this 2:26 or even, 2:30. So, what do you think was kind of key to you just going through that natural progression? Because maybe someone listening can kind of not go from 2:48 to 2:26, but could go from 4:48 to, 4.5 hours in the marathon. So what was it that you think allowed you to kind of keep progressing like that?
For one thing, I ran track in high school, and then I didn't, I was more of a sprinter. I ran the 400 meters and the 800 meters for just a couple of years. And then I didn't run at all in college, and I didn't run until I was in my mid-20s, and just a couple of years before I ran my first marathon. And I had never run over 10 miles before I ran my first marathon. So I was kind of a middle-of-the-pack kind of person in my mind, and I was just going out to run a marathon. I was undertrained, obviously, but I was just going out to see what I could do and have some fun. And, I won the trip, and I wasn't prepared to, in my mind, to run a great marathon, but I was able to run what I was capable of running with the lack of training, I should say. And also, I had only been running for a couple of years, and I was only running 30 to 40 miles a week.
Wow.
So I wasn't, most runners now, come in after they have progressed at, 10K and the shorter distances, and then they give the marathon a shot. So they're highly trained and well prepared for the marathon. So I think that was one of the factors. I trained and harder and got faster and better and stronger with more mileage, and I progressed in a slow manner. And I found a coach, Genji Durden, who actually, after I ran the Honolulu Marathon and, knew of my background that I hadn't trained properly, and I, had this talent. I was 55-second 400-meter runner, and I ran a 2:08 just out of high school. And he saw that, I had this talent and I was capable of, running, really well and possibly becoming one of the best American runners. And in his mind, he wanted me to just slowly progress. And so from going to that 40-mile per week range, he took me to 50 miles per week. And then I ran the Twin Cities Marathon and ran a 2:35. And then the following year, we added about 10 more miles a week, 15 more miles a week. And I was up to about 65, 70 miles by the time I ran my next Twin Cities Marathon. And that's when I ran the 2:32. And it was raining and snowing, and nobody was prepared to, just run hard and try to win the race, right out. Everybody was kind of staying in the pack and worried about, I don't want to, run in the rain. I don't want to, it was windy. It was about 20-mile-per-hour wind gusts. And it was not a pleasant day. And at mile 6, I decided that if I wanted to make the World Championships team and win the National Championship Marathon, which that was, I just had to go. And I went. And I started at 2:34 marathon pace and got a little faster. And by the end, I ended up running 2:32, and the next woman was a couple minutes behind me. And all of that came from strength. And basically, I trained in Spokane, Washington most of the time. So I was training in the ice and the snow, and I wasn't training on a treadmill yet. I was just going out and running in the snow and the elements of winter. And I became really tough and strong. Yeah. And then after that marathon, I decided it was time to give Boston a try. And I trained harder for that. It was up to 75, 80 miles a week. And I took off knowing I had to be consistent. And I think what really helped me throughout my entire career was I never thought I was capable of going out too hard and hanging on in the end. I always went out at an even pace or ran a negative split in all of my races.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I did, I missed up and I paid the price. But mainly, I just ran a consistent pace, and I never went out too hard and slowed down in the end. And my first Boston, I ran a 1:15 for my first half and a 1:14:34 for my second half. And, I ran a 2:29, and I think that made me the fourth or fifth woman to break 2:30, American woman to break 2:30 at that time. And that encouraged me to go, train harder, run, and consistently, and not push to the point of injury. And I was never injured from training and racing. It was, I had accidents and, so forth, but it was never running never really was a problem as far as, holding up and running strong and having injury.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that was because you weren't, pushed too fast too soon. And quite often it seems in professional runners, it's that, they can get away with that big jump for a while and then it kind of catches back up. Whereas you had that, like you said, that steady progression of mileage and being able to have that talent where you could get away with it at the lower end and then, really start to benefit from the even what is now, I guess, like middle level mileage at your highest. So, yeah, I wonder how much of that is just it has, contributed to the reason you were so successful and great that you just ran your own race. Many of my listeners know I personally am huge into that as well. Negative splitting, just taking it easy the first half and, cutting it down the second half, which is great. And actually last month on the podcast, we had Benji as one of the guests, episode 45. And just curious, like with that relationship you had with Benji, how did he know, were you not being coached by anyone and he kind of found that out and kind of reached out to you? How did that relationship come about where he started to coach you?
We had a mutual friend, Don Cardong. He was a good friend of mine. And, I grew up, I trained in Spokane, Washington, and Don founded the Bloomsday Road Race. And that was my first race I had ever run. And Don, was very encouraging and, considered, the fact that I needed a coach. And he suggested Benji would be somebody who would really work well with me. And Benji was just at that time, he's still racing, but he was just kind of ending his elite career. And he was, ready to take on, something more. And I was the first athlete he ever coached. And we made a good team because, I listened to him, I respected him. And he was always really kind, matter of fact.
Yeah.
And sometimes brutally honest. I think a coach needs to be brutally honest and say, you know what, you did this wrong. And, maybe we should try it this way. But, very, very genuine, just to the point. And I knew that I was always going to get the right guidance from him.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't, tiptoe around something to spare my feelings.
Mm-hmm. No, that's always good to have, even though, it can be difficult to address when it's in that moment and you maybe get a hard truth, but in the end, it definitely ends up being a benefit for everyone, really. Now, I wanted to talk, you have written your autobiography, Dandelion Growing Wild, and I wanted to kind of talk about some of the things that you went through and kind of show the listeners how, even you had these things going wrong, but you kept coming back, kept getting stronger, and it allowed you to kind of focus on your running even more so. So starting with kind of the one that I think most people know of, which is, you got pregnant in high school, gave birth to your daughter Rachel in in your junior year of high school, and gave her up for adoption. Now, for those who do not know about your story, did you handle that well at the time and it kind of came back to bite you, your decision you'd made years later, or was it immediately you really struggled with the decision of giving up your child for adoption?
Well, I think for one thing, I was so young, and I think when we all think back when we were 16 years old, our feelings were, all over the place. And I was in a situation where I did try to keep her for a while, and it was hard. And my concern was I grew up in poverty, and, we didn't have a lot to eat when I was a young child. And we would, we had welfare food. I called it 3 boxes of food because, they bring us a block processed cheese and, oatmeal and Roman meal and all that stuff, staples for our family. And I didn't want to quit school, and I didn't want her to grow up in the same situation that I was forced into. I wanted her to have, her own toys. I wanted her to have a good life, and I wanted her to, have parents. I wanted her to have that structure, a family structure. So, fortunately for me, I had good people surrounding me, throughout that time, and good advice, and a couple from our church really wanted a little girl, and so I reluctantly gave her up for adoption, and they took her in and took good care of her. But of course, I always regretted giving up my daughter, but I knew she was in a good place, and I couldn't have provided that for her at the time.
Yeah. And were you able to maintain a relationship with her, throughout her life, or was it something you had to kind of step away from to kind of get over it and kind of mourn and the loss of the relationship at that time?
Well, it was a family that the adoption was with a family I knew, and my mother was, a church member, Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were a very tight-knit group. And my sister became really good friends with the mother of, the adopted mother of Rachel. Anyway, long story short, I saw her a lot. I would go visit my sister who babysat a lot, and I got to see her whenever I would visit my parents or go home and see my family because they all lived in the same area. And I got to watch her grow up from afar.
Yeah.
And then when she was 12, I adopted her back.
Okay.
I adopted her, and she lived with me from then on, and we had a wonderful relationship. And she grew up with her little sister Jamie, and they became very close as well.
That's great. And so special that you were able to, bring her back into your world and develop that relationship, because I'm sure in a lot of situations it doesn't work quite that well, and you don't get the relationship back again, but I'm glad you did. But this wasn't the only kind of event that happened in your life. You've already mentioned your poverty growing up, and there was also, suicide, drug addiction, and, tragic accidents, almost everything you could possibly have that would kind of disrupt a family. And, and ultimately you did have the passing of Rachel in the end. So how did those impact you? Were you able to kind of, just focus on what you could do at the time, or did you go through kind of a big struggle every time one of these events happened and kind of think, why does this keep happening to me?
Yeah, I describe it really well, in the book, because it's really subtle. It's not like, just this one thing, or, it was, I just reverted to, my inner self and whatever. There's just a lot of things going on. But I learned from early on after my father's suicide. Before he committed suicide, he was schizophrenic. Mm-hmm. And some people say bipolar, but he did have different personalities. So it's just, it wasn't real common back then to diagnose schizophrenia, bipolarism, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just that something was wrong, and he was in the mental institution several times. And I could just I could sense, okay, he's going to be this person today, or he's going to be the other person. And instead of kind of taking that all inside, I would sit back, and my sister Debbie would just rub my back because I couldn't breathe. And I think that's when my asthma, I developed asthma as a child. And, my parents were smokers, or my father was, but it was more than that. It was anxiety and stress. And whenever I couldn't breathe, my sister Debbie would sing me our comfort song, which was Angel Baby. And she would rub my back and help me relax. And over time, I learned to just relax. And when something out of the ordinary happened, I would turn on the Andy Griffith Show and pretend I was Opie's sister, or I would watch J.P. Patches and just get lost in the cartoons. And there was all this chaos going on around me, but there was nothing I could do about it. So early on, I learned, just for survival, that I had to, or I shouldn't say had to, I needed to find a way to get through it. And later on, I found running. I found that just going out and running on the beach when I was a little older took me away from the chaos that was going on in the household, fighting, the drunkenness, the drug abuse. And I would go on and come back just fine. It was running was my savior, and from early on and even now. And I think, again, I always had good people that would lend a helping hand, and instead of like some of my siblings would just walk away from it, I would reach out and take that help. And that, I think, helped me so much and helped me get through and not become an addict or or have a mental issue or have any regrets, or I didn't accuse anybody of anything. I just knew, that I had to take care of myself and I couldn't control what they were doing.
Yeah. And very mature of you to kind of realize that even early on. And like you said, running became a big part of your ability to handle this. And how much of a role do you think, your situation, your circumstances that were going on played in kind of how tough you became? Maybe you were able to block out those kind of doubtful thoughts that most of us, tend to have because, we don't really have anything else to kind of occupy our minds. So it's very easy to kind of feel sorry for yourself while running. Do you think kind of that all those things that happened made you tougher and made you able to kind of deal with the pain and the struggles that running itself brings?
I believe that's partially it. I think, running helped me get through these things. But for me, when, I still probably have the same doubts that the other all runners have, it doesn't matter what ability. When you're on the starting line of a race, I'm not fully confident. I just pretty much, I always say, well, I'm hoping for the best, But for me, it was, I have to do this. I've trained for it. I'm here. I have to do it. I need to do it. I need to try. And if I fail, then I'll try again. So I wasn't afraid of failure. And I think that was what helped me more than anything else. I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid to fail, but I was certainly anxious to give it a try and get out there and see what I could do. And regarding the pain in a marathon, I think, going through all those challenges in life and, not so much physical pain, but, mental anguish. I think that really did help me dig down and, push through bad moments in a race, especially in a marathon.
Mm-hmm. And just, related to that, I find it kind of, I feel like if I was in a situation where I was running and, training and trying to be an elite runner and things just kept going wrong, it would be very easy to kind of be like, you know what, running doesn't even matter. It means nothing compared to the rest of things that could go on in life. What was it that kind of kept you coming back when these things kept testing you to not give up and think, well, running is just pointless compared to, what's going on, or feeling sorry for yourself in any way?
I think for me, it was, I think several of my brothers and sisters struggled. Some, a couple of them went to prison, and others lost their families because of drugs and alcohol. And, just their lives were just really messed up. And what I found, for me anyway, is I took responsibility for anything, that I was in control of. If I messed up, it's like, I'm sorry, it's my fault, and I'm going to try to do better next time. Or what I found with most people who really pretty much give up and allow the negative things to come into their life, such as fast food, drugs and alcohol, or whatever I can think of. I think they're not as willing to take responsibility for their actions.
Yes.
And the other thing I learned is I grew up in a place where all I knew was dysfunction. And my siblings and, my cousins and a lot of us, we were just in this dysfunctional cycle. And it's much tougher, more difficult to work your way out. It's much easier to stay in the dysfunction and continue living like that. And so I fought my way out, and that was tough. It was really hard to just dig myself out and stay out. And I was capable of doing that early on. And I believe part of that was because I did have Rachel when I was 16 years old. That taught me, I had to stay there. I need to, deal with it. I need to take care of her. I always wanted to get her back into my life. And that was one of my goals. Once, I finished high school, I did go to college. And once I started my family, and I had my daughter, Jamie, that's when I knew I was going to get her back. I had to figure out a way to do that because, she was already adopted.
Yeah.
But I found a way, and believe it or not, running gave me the courage and strength to do so. And winning the Twin Cities Marathon and winning the U.S. Championships and going further with, financially, gave me the means to do so. Yeah. But also it gave me the courage to leave a husband who was abusive. So it just gave me all this courage of, to get out of that abusive relationship. And he didn't want anything to do with my daughter, Rachel. He forbid me to see her.
Wow.
And so it was like, I just had the courage, and I knew if I were to win that race, there's so much riding on it, that I would get, I would have the means to leave my husband, which I was about to do anyway, but I needed, to figure out how to do that. And the money came immediately. I got bonus money. I got prize money. I got money to go to the World Championship. So it all came to me at once at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to move out of the abusive relationship, bring Rachel back into my life, and she grew up and lived with me for the rest of her life.
Yeah, and that in itself, I mean, making that decision, getting out of that abusive relationship, that, let alone everything else, takes a lot of courage and strength to be able to do that. There's so many people that do end up kind of stuck in situations because they can't get out of these relationships, can't bring themselves to quite take that step. So, well done to you. And do you think, was that in your mind when you were in that Twin Cities race, this is my way out? Or were you kind of at that time just focused on, doing your best as a runner?
It was on my mind continuously because my marriage and dysfunction and the abuse was happening until it came to a full life or death situation. And I did not want my daughter Jamie living like that.
Yeah.
And I was feeling like I was falling back into that dysfunction that I grew up in as a child. And there was no way I was ever going to even, be close to that situation again. And I knew that I was working towards getting Rachel back before that time. I was trying to figure out how I could manage it. And I was, looking into maybe finding, actually I did have a job lined up just in case this running didn't work out.
Yeah.
So I did have a backup plan. It wasn't like, I'm going to go here and I'm going to run this race and then I'll, win some money and get my daughter back. And that's not really what was in my mind because I didn't know what I was capable of doing. But I did have a job lined up at a local college in Spokane where I was going to help with the athletic team, working with them on nutrition and nutrition guidelines. And so I had a job. So I planned to leave anyway, but it was a matter of winning the Twin Cities Marathon gave me the opportunity to get Rachel back and give me the funds to do so.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that happened and you were able to do so. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about you didn't have this fear of failure. Now, for someone listening who, really does struggle with that fear of failure, if they kind of, actually are real with themselves and kind of will accept it. Do you have any idea of what it was that kind of allowed you to not have that fear of failure when that's, something that actually really gets most runners, is that fear of not being good enough? What was it in you that kind of allowed you to not have that as a concern?
Well, I think, I was a middle child growing up. I had 11 siblings, with half brothers and sisters and so forth. But I was that middle child always trying to prove myself, always. I mean, it was like nobody could, I could talk and nobody would listen to me. I was just kind of, so I had to do special things to get attention, sometimes silly things like, jumping off the highest dock, even though it was dangerous and I could have killed myself, but just getting the attention. And so I started out feeling like I wasn't good enough. So whatever I did, it was going to be, at least I tried, and it made me better. As a person, as an athlete, as just bravery, whatever. But whatever I did, I became better. And then when I did, run, even in my track races in high school, I was never beaten in my races. And I was, in the beginning, I was afraid. It's like, I'm going to let everybody down. And then, I ran my first year, track races and did fine. I went to the state meet and won the state mile and the quarter mile and the half mile. And I was on both winning relays. Yep. And it was all, it wasn't expected. I was just thrilled every time I won. And it was just so thrilling. But then after I, had to take a year off and I had Rachel and I had to come back and run track. It was my senior year. That was the only time I felt I had to prove myself. I was frightened to death. And it wasn't so much the racing, it was just people were going to see me again after, I was ashamed. I was ashamed that, and I gave her up for adoption. I was suffering through that. I was just a kind of emotional mess my senior year. And the running put everything back into a good place for me. People came up and congratulated me and told me, I was strong and I made the right decision. And again, good people came back into my life and helped me through, the difficult times. And my first race back on the track, I won, and I continued to win. Mm-hmm. And I won for 4 state titles my senior year.
Yeah.
So but it wasn't expected. I was just thrilled, and so I never really expected anything. I wanted to win, but I didn't feel like it was like I could do it, and it was a sure thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of it, isn't it? Expectations in runners are really what bring on that fear of failure. So that definitely makes sense. And as you mentioned, you did have that huge success immediately after you came back after giving birth to Rachel. And one thing I love that I read from you is that you said, even though it was your first race back and you've just told us you were really nervous, you said from the get-go, I was there to run my best, do what I could to win. I was totally focused on the task at hand, which is wonderful and exactly how someone should be. But I'm just curious, how did you have, especially as a high school runner, that mature of a mindset to just focus on doing your best? And then secondly, how did you, for anyone listening who maybe is going through a struggle of some kind, how did you kind of put that out of your head and not allow those, fears and struggles that you're going through to kind of destroy you mentally, and have you focusing on the wrong things rather than just doing your best like you ended up doing?
Well, I feel that it was refreshing to step away from all of that, and running gave me that. You just push everything aside. Here I am, I'm running. I'm going to run hard. I'm going to push myself as hard as I can. Or even on an easy long run, it was just, I was getting out there, getting away from it. Just, just kind of purifying my mind in a way. And in a race, it was more like, now I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to just really give it a go. But I truly enjoyed running, and I didn't hurt as badly as I think some of my competitors. And maybe I did. I just didn't realize it. But I didn't find running painful. I didn't find it overly hard. I just found it joyful. And not that I was singing along, skipping along. I was pushing hard, and it was a lot of work, and it was hard work. But it's a chance to just get away from it all.
That makes sense. I could see that. So you would say to others to kind of try and view it the same way, see this as a positive in your life when, other things are kind of not ideal right now.
Right. I would definitely suggest that to any runner or any sport, really. Just get out there and just get away from it. And also, I always think back to what am I going through now? What am I suffering through now? Is it really all that bad? Is it, or can I just get away and do a run and then come back to it? Which you can. You can, and you can come back healthier, less stressed, less anxious. And it's much more healthy to, it's almost like, what is like therapy? You can go, to a therapist and talk for an hour. You can go out and run for an hour. I feel it's the same thing. Yeah,
so true. And actually, I've interviewed Alicia Shea before, and she talked about Ryan Shea, and she talked about the same thing, that running ended up being that, thing that she needed to kind of, deal with what was going on. And it seems quite a common thing to do. And speaking of kind of things being like cathartic, writing your book, how did you have the courage to kind of share these such personal, and even in this interview, parts of your life, when, many elites don't share any kind of struggles or setbacks in their life? And then related to that, was it cathartic or like therapeutic for you to write? Or, did it bring back, memories and things that, really were difficult to approach?
It was very cathartic to write the story. But also I wanted to explain to my daughters, Rachel was actually alive at the time when I started writing. And I lost it was a long story, but anyway, I lost all my work and I had to start over, and that was after she passed away. So I was able to, rewrite what I had written, and then have a better perspective on what had happened and in my life, and better able to explain to my daughter Jamie, why was our family so messed up? How did I escape? What I learned from it. And I wrote it also, my story, to help my siblings and my mother and father, stepfather, and whomever. I wanted them to see how I felt and how I escaped a lot of what they had to deal with. And my sister Debbie, who she was in prison a couple times, and I'm in communication with her a little bit. That she even told me, please, when you write your autobiography, she thought it was just going to be about running and about a little bit about our family life. She goes, please write about our family life and show the reader that you can escape this. It can be done, and how running was my savior, and it helped me live a good life and give my daughters a good life and move towards better things. And she also asked me to show, and not tell so much, but show through my story, which hopefully I did, that the drugs and alcohol and the dysfunction messed up her life, and it ruined her son's life for many years. And it's a really serious issue. If you don't have something positive in your life going forward. And so when I wrote the story, I didn't get into it as deep where it would hurt me. But it wasn't superficial either. It was honest. It was, a true story, but I didn't dig into the hurtful things.
Yeah.
And that really was good for me because I could read through it. I didn't feel any, even when I read it now, sometimes I'll reread it just to remind myself. But it's actually uplifting to me to read the story. And because I do have some humor in it, and that humor, I think, really got me through a lot of difficult times. I could sit, I would find something to smile about or laugh about, or I'd do something silly, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay to do something silly if in a time of crisis. And so I read back on what I wrote, and I don't think I would have changed anything.
That's actually that's one of the questions I was going to ask you about towards the end, but I guess while you just mentioned that, I was going to actually ask you if that whether you would have done anything differently, or if you even allowed yourself to go there to think that. But you've obviously answered that question. So is there anything else you would add to that with regards to why that is?
For one thing, I don't think, who knows what would have happened if I did something differently. It could have caused the other problems. It could have caused something. Effect. So, but, like right now, I'm happy. I have a happy life. My daughter is happy. She has a beautiful family. I'm a grandmother. I enjoy life. I really have no regrets, other than, of course, I wish there weren't so many deaths in my family, but that was out of my control. But within my control, I feel I did okay with it. And I don't think I'd want to go back and change anything.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for being honest. And okay, we've got some, you said about, humor and fun things. I've got some of those to ask you about in just a minute. But one more thing I wanted to ask you about, one thing I read about you, I think it was in the Runner's World Guide to Women's Running or something like that. I should have written down the name of the book. But it said about you being passionate early on that you were not going to push your daughters to be runners. And I was just curious why that was important to you. You mentioned in this interview that you wanted them, you just kind of allowed them to play and you didn't want them to just do running. You wanted to do them to do other sports. Now, for many, I personally am constantly being told about, local people in my area, these kids who can run, 5 blah, blah, blah mile and, they're 12 years old. I want to do this. And, I always respond, just let them play. Just let them play. But I was just curious what that was for you, for anyone listening who would think, yeah, but why wouldn't you want to, see what your daughter could do if they were your daughter, especially being someone as fast as you were?
Right. I think my thought on that is if they were going to enjoy running, and they broke. I think the enjoyment has to be there. I talked with many young women who were anorexic or had, eating issues, had stress issues, and they'd talk to me, away from their parents, and tell me how much they just really hated running, and they wished their parents would back off. And I was kind of like their friend, and, I just kind of talked with them and worked with them and tried to help them through their problems the best I could. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted Jamie, Rachel just did not want to run. But she watched us run, and she tried it, and she ran with me for fun, but she didn't enjoy running. And she chose that, and, she was great at soccer. She loved soccer and baseball, or softball, excuse me. And she played really well and did great in high school, junior high and high school. Uh-huh. Jamie chose running. She won most of the 8 meters and mile races. One of the best runners in the state. She was the state champion in the mile. Mm-hmm. And she loved running. She still loves running, and we live only a mile away from each other. And she'll zip over here, and we'll go for a run together on the golf course, and then we'll run her home. And, we enjoy running together. And that's what I wanted. I wanted her to, and if she wanted to be a competitive runner, which she was, she loved it. She got a scholarship to run cross country and track at CU, Colorado University. Yep. And she did well, and she chose not to, she ran under a 3-hour marathon a couple times. And, off of, running 30, 40 miles a week and going to school. And she's a teacher now, second grade teacher. And she'll still run. And she, has ambition to run another marathon and, go for, a 250, a 240 if she chooses. But, I gave her the opportunity to make that choice instead of pushing her too early, where she might have had the success she had, but then not enjoy it later on.
Yes, absolutely. I could not agree more. And I think that is a true testament to you and showing that the reason she probably is still running is because you didn't push her too far. And you mentioned about people coming up to you and, kids coming up to you, young adults coming up to you saying about, just wanting to be out of it. And I see that so often, and it just breaks my heart because, there's so many runners out there who could have been runners for life, but just get pushed too far, too fast. And I'm so glad that you saw that you didn't want Jamie to kind of go down that same path. So I just wanted to mention that, as I thought that was really powerful. Now, I wanted to ask you some fun things, some things that I've learned about you. One, I have a question from Sarah in my running community who wants to know, do you still drink wine when you lift?
I do.
You do? What is the reasoning for that? When she asked me that question, I was like, what?
It's kind of like a reward. So it's like, I hate going down into the weight room, or wherever the weight room might be where I'm living, but I want to go down there and then, warm up a little and start lifting. It's just not fun for me. So I'll take a glass of wine down. It's not like I'm guzzling it down. But, I'll do a couple sets. And, maybe, a lot of reps, like 1, 2 sets, arm curls and whatever. And then I'll take a little sip of wine and then go to the next. And it's, I don't even drink the full glass of wine, but just having it there, and it kind of entices me down into the basement to lift my weights. And it's kind of fun, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that is fun. And have you actually seen, I think there's these weights you can get, or maybe they're like, I can't remember exactly what they are, but I remember seeing things where people were lifting with wine glasses. And it said like drink wine, or I use wine, not weights, or something like that. Like might be a perfect gift for you in the future. And then the other thing I read was that you like to eat a lot, which I thought was kind of interesting. Now, my runners who listen to this show, we are always talking about, favorite food. Everyone knows I am a huge sweet tooth, love ice cream, love cakes, all that. So I just was curious if that is true that you do like to eat, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm definitely one of those people too. What are 3 foods that you could not live without if you absolutely had to just stick to 3 foods for the rest of your life?
I would say healthy foods, of course we need them. But I couldn't live without some type of meat.
Like, are we talking a juicy burger or like a steak?
I'm talking about a steak.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a steak, but just some type of course, I go more with buffalo and the healthier meat. But I just really crave that type of protein.
Yep.
And the other would be milk products. I mean, sour cream, milk. I just eat a lot of it, drink a lot of it. It's just something I really crave and need.
So you've given two. You did say healthy foods. Can you give us one specifically that you love?
I love to eat, salads are okay, but I love asparagus.
Asparagus, interesting. Okay. All right. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing those. Now we're just going to take a moment to thank our sponsors, and we'll be back with the Running for Real 4. Earlier on in the show, I mentioned that Body Health Perfect Amino made a big difference to me, and it really did, especially at this time of year when marathon training starts and things begin to get really tough. This is always a time we feel a bit overwhelmed as the accumulation of miles starts to catch up, especially when combined with those hard, heavy training runs. I found that taking Body Health Perfect Amino made my body recover from training that much quicker, meaning I could really attack those long runs and hard sessions. But it's not just for marathoners, it can be runners of any distance. If you get sore or fatigued during training, Body Health Perfect Amino will help you recover too, and here's why. Your body absorbs 99% of the amino acids in Body Health Perfect Amino, compared with only 48% in eggs and 32% in meat or fish. I would take them immediately after a run, and as they absorb within 25 minutes, that would give me a nice amount of time to stretch, another component of staying healthy. Then you can enjoy your post-race meal. Get 10% off at bodyhealth.com using coupon code TINA10. Are you bored of the treadmill yet? I hated the treadmill and would have done almost anything to avoid it in the winter, but I also didn't have a V at that point, which would have made it so much better, especially with the treadmill capability that LifeBeam have been working so hard to perfect. It works seamlessly and will make the time go by a lot quicker. Well, I guess as quick as staring at a wall can go by, right? Even if you're able to get outside and do all your training, V is the perfect running buddy to keep with you when all those fair weather runners are taking their time off inside because it's too cold or too warm. Last month, I introduced you to V herself in these messages as the virtual trainer to keep you company, and she's so lifelike and real. I hope that kind of came across. If you want to enter to win your own V, go to getv.com/running for real, and you can enter to win. All three of our recent winners are loving getting to know her, and you can too. I really enjoy the clear quality of the headphones, and I think you will as well. Make sure you go to getv.com/running for real. All right, Kim, just 4 more questions for you, starting with a unique nutrition tip or something that you used to eat before you ran, or still do, maybe.
I never went out for a hard workout or a race feeling hungry. Mm-hmm. I felt I wanted to be fueled up and ready to go.
Yep. And so what was your kind of go-to thing that you would have? Or was there
something gentle on my stomach that I would practice over time, and that would be a big bowl of oatmeal, a banana, and I put maple syrup in my oatmeal with a little bit of skim milk.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing. All right, what about a running for real moment, a moment that only runners will understand?
Not just one time. There were a couple times when I would be out on a long run and I call it the golden orb. It's like an orb where you've been out for a couple hours and you just are out of glycogen. You feel horrible.
Yep.
It's like you're this cold sweat. You're almost shaky, and you just want to sit down and go to sleep. And that's hit me several times. One time I was running, and I was at the point where I was 4 miles away from home. I had run for 18 miles. I still had to finish my 22-miler, and I saw a milk dud on the road.
A milk dud?
Yeah, a milk dud. It's just sitting there, and I picked it up to make sure it was not a milk dud, and it was, and I ate it.
That's surprising that you that you managed to detect that was a milk dud.
It was chocolate, so I figured anything chocolate wasn't going to hurt me, and then when I chewed it, it was a milk dud.
Okay. Well, we know you like milk duds as well now, so or maybe that was just a desperate time moment. Thank you for sharing. What about a high moment for you?
A high moment for me was when I was, even though it wasn't a great thing, I felt proud of myself for it, is I was running the Boston Marathon, and I was, in 24th place, and I was working my way up, running consistently and running a good, strong race. Mm-hmm. I moved up to 4th place when I hit the Newton Hills, ran right around 18 miles, right in the middle of the Newton Hills, and I was getting ready to pass Uta Pippig and move into 3rd place. Joni Samuelson was about 30 seconds in front of her. I could see her, and she was my next target. And so I was running up the hill, and I was just sneaking up. I run very quietly so nobody can hear me when I'm coming up on them. It was just a really quiet, kind of calm, dark, cloudy day. And I tiptoed up, ready to pass Uta, and a wheelchair tipped over in front of us. And a guy tipped over on his side. And I looked at Uta, and she looked at me, and we kind of put our hands in the air in a non-verbal agreement we were going to help the guy out. And she grabbed one side, and I pushed him up, and we gave him a little push and said, "Go on, keep going." And then we continued on with the race. Wow. And I ended up, and I ran my PR marathon that year, but I ended up passing Uta and finally catching Joni, with a mile to go, and ended up 2nd in Boston and ran my 2:26 there. And I was just, I was disappointed I didn't win. However, I was pleased I ran a PR, and most especially helped that guy. I never could have lived with myself had I just left him there.
So was he he was in the race?
Yes, he was. He was, back then it was in 91. It was a mass start. We started with the men. The wheelchairs were a little in front of everybody. So, it was just it wasn't just these corral start.
So did you ever get to speak to him afterwards?
No, never.
Never found him again?
But Uta and I talk about it every once in a while when I see him.
That's cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and what a thoughtful thing to do. Just another example of runners just being good, genuine people. And finally, what did you tell yourself when you were on the start line of a race?
It was mainly, you're here now. There's, you just stay calm and why worry? Yeah. It's going to take energy. So, I tried to just keep that calmness within me, because there's nothing you can do. And the more you worry, the less prepared you are to, run a mentally strong race. And it's just stay calm. You're going to enjoy this. And I think what my worry was all along was, I feel fine now, and I'm going to feel fine, but I really did not like mile 12 or mile 18 in a marathon. Mm-hmm. Because it's I'm not even halfway finished, and and then when I get to 18, it's once I get to 18, it's okay, I know I could go and finish. Yeah. It's just that middle section. I don't know what it is.
No, I know what you're saying.
But I just have to keep that middle section out of my mind. Whatever worries you the most in a marathon, just push that aside, and I just say, calm down, don't worry about it. It'll happen when it happens. And that's pretty much what I told myself.
No, that's so good. And I think that's good for people to hear that's, exactly what you said to yourself, and that you said, like you said, there's nothing you can do now. So really good to mention. Thank you. And finally, I have my guests send a photo of them to put in the show notes of them in a power pose. That's something you would do when you are standing on the start line of a race. I'm sure you must have one from some point in your running career of what you would do. If you can find one, will you send us a photo of you in a power pose?
Absolutely. I'll look around and see if I can find.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Kim, if people want to find out more about you, maybe you could talk about aerobic management, your coaching business. Where can they find out more about you?
I'm on our website, Anaerobic Management, and it's it has all the information about our coaching, a little bit of bios about each coach. It's myself, my husband, John Sinclair, who was a great runner.
Yeah.
In his time, actually they called him King of the Roads. And our coaching partner, Kent. And it just kind of gives a bio on us and, what we do and how we coach on an individual basis.
And then what about other places that people can find you on social media or anything else like that?
I've Facebook. I have the Dandelion Growing Wild Facebook page, and I also have Kim Jones' Facebook page, and it would be the Runner Boulder. And then there are several articles.
Yes,
if they just Google me and look at some of the Runner's World stories. So just I think Google is probably the best way to really
or buy the book.
Right, and find out the good and the bad when you Google.
Well, we've had a bit of both of good and bad, but mostly good, how you came out of it and how you persevered out the other side. So we'll put links to all that we just mentioned there in the show notes. But Kim, thank you so much for being so honest and vulnerable and just your time today. This has just been an amazing interview, and I really, really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
I had absolutely no idea about the story behind Kim. I always just knew her for what she'd accomplished and how fast she ran. But it just goes to show that everyone has a story, and it shows us what we can overcome if we want to, and how we can use those struggles to make us even stronger. You can find links to everything we talked about today in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 48. Now, I just want to ask you, have you heard about the new podcast series that I am now offering? These are 5+ hours of dedicated, concise, to-the-point advice from some of the world's best running experts. From Hal Higdon to Jada Sherry to Jenny Hadfield to Elise Kopecky. There are just so many great experts, and there are 6 to 8 episodes under each of the following topics: mental training, nutrition, first-time runners, marathon training, coming back from injuries, pregnancy, and postpartum. That's one together, the last one. So you can check out tinamuir.com/series for more information, or you can find it in the show notes, which is going to be at tinamuir.com/episode 48. Now, next week, I have Andrew Jones, who is a physiologist, and he is an expert in all things recovery. So for those of you who are interested in how to maximize your recovery to bounce back quicker, this guy has got all the knowledge you need. He's going to be real with us. He doesn't work for any particular company, although he does have a lot of research and knowledge about beets and beetroots, just in case you were curious about that. So he is going to tell us about that, but in addition to other things. Make sure you check that one out, and I hope you have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.